Oh yeah, sexy biscuits. Nice.
Long was 1975. Using girls on the rise. Reviewing games late at night and sometimes friends. But Long was 1975.
Non-Boys Post 1975, and welcome to a vlog, not the Wednesday vlog. Still a little bit up in the air on that, but a vlog. Apologise there was no vlog last week, and I thought it's been absolutely ages since I got in front of the camera. So I wanted to continue my series of videos on nostalgic memories of. I think that's the name I'm going to stick with now for these. I've done the Master System, PlayStation 2, PlayStation 1, and I'm just, these videos, to me, I don't know, I could, talk nostalgia on these systems, that had such an influence on my life all day long. But the ZX Spectrum has the biggest influence. Essentially, that's what made me a home gamer, I guess. My main experience of playing video games, before that would have been a Pong machine and the arcades. Now, the reason I'm kind of wanting to do the Spectrum is, I forgot what an absolutely fantastic, amazing machine it was. Because if you've been watching my channel lately, you know that I've been playing an absolute ton of Spectrum games. And specifically, homebrew games. Because there's a competition going on, or was a competition going on, where you had to port a game from, or the game had to be a port basically. So I played this amazing port of Mighty Final Fight to the Spectrum from the NES, Ninja Gaiden from the Game Boy to the Spectrum, which to me is kind of cool because I always thought that the Game Boy felt like a handheld Spectrum, And yeah, and I've been playing other Spectrum games, but this untapped wealth or resource of games that in the 30 years prior to the Spectrum, people have learned all kinds of new tricks, and it's absolutely amazing. And I'm playing these for the most part with a keyboard. I'm not playing them on my Vega because I love my Vega, absolutely love my Vega, but it's not ideal for all games or some games. And I generally plug a keyboard into my Wii, and it's an amazing Spectrum emulator. So you get that hands-on feeling of the keyboard, because that's how I played my Spectrum back in the day, and it properly does 1 to 8K games. But anyone who knows me knows I absolutely love the ZX Spectrum. My twin brother, my older brother, it was a massive impact into our life. Obviously made by the legend Sir Clive Sinclair in 1982, following on from the 16K model, which followed on from the ZX81, which followed on from the Z80. And also there was no sort of, well, everyone knows this, video game crash in the UK, probably because of budget games. I mean, I talked to people outside the United Kingdom, more so North America, and when you say that there were games for these systems from $1.99, $2.99, right up to $14.99, they were like, what, that cheap? And yeah, so when games were rubbish, and there were a lot of them, massively produced in the masses, I should say, it didn't really matter. Oh, balls, I wasted my pocket money, £2. Oh, how would I live till next Saturday? So there wasn't that backlash. And also people outside the United Kingdom seem to forget that the UK was the biggest producer of home microcomputers in the world at the time. To me, that still boggles my mind. There were so many, like the Dragon 32, Auric, the Toshibas. Many of them fell by the wayside, but we just pumped them out. The two mainstays became the ZX Spectrum, Commodore 64, and the Amstrad, but the main battle was between the Commodore 64 and the ZX Spectrum. But my first experience of games at this point, before our Spectrum, was a Pong machine, a binatone Pong machine, with the paddles hardwired in, and that gun. Of course, you wouldn't be able to make a gun for those systems look like that now. It looked like a proper gun, even though you just shot and moving around square. But this is about the Spectrum, not about that. And arcade machines, when we used to go to a caravan in Blue Anchor Bay on the coast, and there used to be so many arcades down there, so many. I mention them all the time when I talk nostalgic about arcade games. Now, it was on TV because of the the BBC programme. Was it Microlive? I'm not sure. But this emerging world of computers, home UK market was, as a kid, because I would have been 7 when we got our ZX Spectrum, I was aware of it. I never actually been hands-on with it. I didn't know anyone who had one, and I didn't even know we were going to get one. I don't even know if I wanted one. I'd seen glimpses of it on TV and stuff like that. And then my dad came home with it one day, and I think he bought it because he had a garage in Railway Arches back then. Yeah, screw EastEnders. My dad worked in the Arches first. The bloke who owned the Arch next door or something, a guy called Bernie Bones. I don't know how I remember this. Because he was a Star Trek fan, that's why they called him Bone, but his first name was Bernie. I think he sold it to my dad, I don't know, off the back of a lorry or whatever, but it was the rubber mat one, still my favourite version despite the sound, and it came with a couple of games, so it must have been second hand actually. It came with Jetpack, which I think is probably the first game I ever played on it, the Horizon tape, which was packed full of loads of stuff that, and kind of complemented the manual, which was a big, thick manual, and the amazing ZX Spectrum Basic guide to program came with it, and a bunch of computer magazines. And I think the thought being, my dad was like, hey, we'll teach our kids to use a computer, they can learn programming, they can, make loads of money, and I can retire off them. And he didn't really know that mainly the reason that Sir Clive was kind of, envious of the BBC, but the bloke who made the BBC was envious of the Spectrum, that it wasn't really going to become this serious, business or tutorial machine, that people thought it was going to become a flat-out games machine, and right from the start, that's what me and my brothers used it for, and it was amazing. We were hooked on it. And this was the golden era, 1982. Games were in their infancy on that Spectrum. Some of them looked terrible. Companies like Ultimate Play the Game came along, who eventually became Rare, started pumping out really, really high quality games, and also there was horrible that we had to fight each other to get on it because there were three of us, and you don't play nice, but loading games in by cassette. And then what we used to do, because it didn't have decent sound, it just had a Spectrum beeper. I don't know how we learned this, but if you pulled the ear out and left the mic into the cassette recorder, ejected the tape, and then press play and record, was it? Or just play? I can't remember. With no tape in it. Then the mic would pick up the Spectrum bleeper and make it loud because it didn't come out the TV, but that didn't matter because you could still do amazing stuff with it. And that was it. Once we had this Spectrum, Christmases, birthdays became absolutely magic. Going down Bristol, going to the British home stores in the centre because they had the biggest selection of Spectrum games. Although Spectrum games were everywhere then, like little corner shops, newsagents would sell it. You'd have corner shops devoted entirely to Spectrum, Commodore Amstrad games and BBC, and it was like your birthday. You take all your money and you go and buy one big game or a couple of, cheapies and stuff like that, and then you get the magazines. Sinclair used a Crash magazine, and your Sinclair were the ones that I read, and Crash magazine obviously was the stuff of legends because you've only got to look at the amazing artwork in it. Was it Terminal Man? I can't remember. The high score tables where they put people's heads on spikes and stuff like that. And yeah, it was great. It was magical, a couple of games here, a couple of games there, pocket money, doing some work, working in a kitchen, or, papers and stuff like that. You constantly could, because of the price of the systems, get cheap games, constantly get cheap games. So, like I said, the crash never happened. And then, just so many good memories. Then my dad we did get a joystick eventually, but we were keyboard guys, even though people argued that the rubber mat was a horrible keyboard, and for programming, I guess it was. But for me, that's my computer hands, crab hands, jazz hands, up, down, QA, O left, P right, and I don't care what anyone says, M fire, not space, M. That it didn't matter that the keyboard was like a corpse. It just worked. It was fantastic. But everyone back then, everyone got the Quick Shot 2 joystick. That thing was 4 sucker cupped like that, 2 buttons, even though all buttons were the same, and an auto fire. That was brilliant. That was a godsend for Daley Thompson Decathlon. Who remembers that? Because we used to hammer the shit out of the keys. And I remember my dad one day came along and said, "You are going to alternate those keys, right? Why? Because you're only using 3 of them. You're going to wear them out." Oh yeah, and we did our spacebar with something else that was starting to get, even though we didn't use it for far, a bit worn out. I forget what we used that on, but yeah, stuff like that, Hypersports, everyone knows what they were. And then all of a sudden, primary school, 7, 8, 9 years old at this point, other people started getting this machine. And at this point, I remember my dad sent off for the ZX Spectrum Plus 48K, where you basically put the inside of your rubber mat, unless you wanted to buy it, but you could build it and it was cheaper and it came in the post, put your rubber mat inside a keyboard that would, basically make it cheaper to buy, and upgrade your computer. It had no hardware upgrades or anything like that, no sound upgrades, but it had one amazingly useful thing. It had a button on the side to reset the machine back to the operating menu so you could load a game in again. Load, was it double quotation, double quotation? You could put the name inside, but we never did. Yeah, that was brilliant, because before then, and everyone complained about this, you used to pull the power out the top and put it back into the rubber mat keyboard, but that used to be so bad for it and kill people's Spectrum. So that little plus button thingy on the side was amazing. And yeah, that was it still didn't really have a proper keyboard because it was flush. But yeah, so you know, school was starting to be different groups of people here and there. Commodore and Spectrum were basically the main phrase. But this is where you first started lending people games, lending people games. They'd lend you one for a couple of days, you'd lend one to them, and I don't know where we found out. Maybe we found out because, like, software piracy, because I still bought games, by the way. You could pirate, but you still bought games. That was the thing. But it must have been on TV. Home taping is killing the computer industry, and so you're like, wait, hang on a minute, you can just copy them. That's mind-blowing when you're a kid. And when you're a kid, I don't give a fuck what anyone says. When you're a kid, that's not criminal. Might be a little bit naughty, but it's not criminal. Yeah, and all you needed was a double tape cassette player. My dad had a big, fat, really, really good, ironically, Amstrad Music Centre. There we go. We used an Amstrad to pirate Sinclair games. And that's what you used to do. You used to borrow games off your mates, they lend them one, and then you'd have it. And Boots used to sell, because Boots sold Spectrum games as well. They would sell cassettes called C15s, 15 minutes long. That was it. What, 7.5 a side, specifically for you to pirate games on. They probably said it was to save your programs and stuff like that. Bollocks. They spotted, you know, a gap in the market. But yeah, that's what we did. But the real fun was when you got to secondary school or high school. That was when, mainly because times the amount of kids there by 10. So we even used to take it on holiday to, like, the caravan or the chalet when we went on holiday, in case those days when it was raining and my parents didn't want to have to entertain 3 young boys, you know, like that, because, like, it's pissing down with rain, you're stuck in a caravan. What? Here you go, play your Spectrum, that's them, shut up. Go and put it in the other room, or go and put it in the bedroom on the little black and white or something like that. Done. But there were so many, you know, additional things for it, you know, peripherals and things like that. We got a light gun eventually, but that was on the +3. We had who remembers this, Opus Discovery disc drive, but it never became a standard. But it was good because it plugged in the back of the Spectrum, and you would have joystick ports and other interfaces on it. And so yeah, you couldn't buy games on this disc format, but it was a pain in the ass, but you could save games to this disc format. But I think we had to use a multi-phase for that. But yeah, that was like the first thing that blew me away, which was disc drop. You mean I don't have to wait 15 minutes for a game to load just for it to cock up right at the last bit and say, tape loading error? Who remembers that bad boy? But yeah, that was like, wow, disc drive, this is the future, you know. And then we had what was it, the Cheetah joystick? Cheetah Plus Pro? The one that even had leopard print on it, or tiger print. That was great. But I remember, you know, that we carried on, we bought games still, we pirated games still, birthdays became great, you know. And so I didn't, you know, I had this for seven years before, you know, or 6 years before I bought my own system, which was the Sega Master System. So this was a big chunk of my life that I had the ZX Spectrum, you know, and never felt the need to upgrade. And all the big software houses would, you know, release like big movie licensed games, like 18 certificate movies like Rambo, Cobra, Robocop. They all came out on the Spectrum, and people used to argue about, you know, the graphic level of, or nature of the violence in the game on a Spectrum. I know people complain about the NES, but look at the Spectrum. And obviously going to school arguing with the Commodore 64 kids, they would say, we got more colours and better sound. Ours has got higher definition graphics. And even when you knew a game was better than the one you were playing on your system, well, they had a game that you could not have on your system, you would still vehemently defend your system. But it was good-natured, you know, no one got hurt, but it was such a part of my childhood I love. I guess the reason being this is one of my fondest parts of my childhood is it's, you know, when I started getting onto Sega Master System, Sega Mega Drive territory, I was working, you know, I worked on a Saturday in my dad's garage since I was about, I don't know, 9, I guess, though. But, so there was a level of responsibility already creeping into your life then. And this was when I was a really young kid, you know, when you had pocket money, nothing else, and your parents would buy you these machines, if you were lucky, as a massive treat. So I was a kid. It was, you know, I've got like the world is just opened up to me. Look at all these games, look at all these games. And another big important thing for us was arcade ports, because arcade ports were perfect for you, because you used to go to the arcades and see stuff like Outrun, Chase HQ, Afterburner, Thunderblade. I'm listing nothing but Sega games. You know, Double Dragon, Bomb Jack. These are all important games that you really, really wanted to play, mainly to save you money or to complete. And they would, you know, more often than not, pale in significance to the arcade games. But it didn't matter, because at its very heart, they were, you know, ports. And you look beyond that, like your eye or your brain had like a 3D effects chip that would kind of fill in all the gaps and speed it up. And, you know, the concessions you would make, like playing the music on the second tape from Outrun and stuff like that. That was more than enough to fill in the gaps and make it the arcade experience. These were great times for me as a kid, because it was like, you know, the magazines would be like, holy shit, Outrun's coming to the Spectrum. Got gameplay recently. I like it, but it's not aged the best. You know, it's when I first started my YouTube channel, one of the things I had to do was do gameplays of the Spectrum and share this amazing machine. And then eventually, and I did actually have a Master System at this point. I can't remember why or when it happened. I'm getting hungry, sorry. I think it must have been, again, it was secondhand and it fell into my dad's lap. But I had a Master System at this point, but I still played my Spectrum. And when we got this machine, I played it a lot, because this is when Amstrad bought out the Spectrum because of his failed, stupid electric car. Ironically, ahead of its time, because everyone's got a fucking hard-on for green shit right now. So that would have probably, you know, saved him if it was now, not then. That's an odd statement, but yeah. Oh, so Clive, if you didn't do that car, where would the industry be now? We'd probably still be a big mainstream player. There aren't any big mainstream players in British computing anymore. But yeah, so my dad got a plus 3, so it was basically the same keyboard as the CPC 464 6128, like a proper keyboard, and it still said Sinclair on it and Spectrum, but it was an Amstrad machine. And yeah, we had the plus 3, and we had a multi-tap. Now this was just groundbreaking, because you could back up games to tape or disc. Obviously, we still plug a cassette recorder. Some people seem to think you couldn't do that. Plug a cassette recorder into the side of the plus 3 and play Spectrum games, but with a multi-tap, which is just this thing in the back port where you just press the red button and it stopped the game, bring up a menu, you could add pokes, you could do all kinds of stuff, or you could back up the game. But why I loved it was you would back it up at the exact point you pressed the red button. So if a game was really, really bloody hard, or, you know, like you had no continues or credits or anything like that, you get as far as you could. Sometimes I used to complete games by just crawling along, but you just hit the red button, back it up to disc in this case. What were they weren't 3.5, were they 3-inch? I don't know. Yeah, back it up, and then you could just press the red button, you could load, and I loved that. I mean, bought out the back of a magazine, and it was basically, it is a multi-face, isn't it? Because multi-tap's the extender for the NES controllers anyway. But yeah, that was, so even though I had a Master System, I still, you know, came back to the plus 3. Plus it had decent sound. They finally fixed the sound. I want to say, is it the same sound as an Amstrad? I don't know. Don't quote me on that. It might even be the same sound as the Atari ST. But yeah, that would probably be the swan song in the Spectrum for me. But, you know, we never bought games on disc. We just backed them up to disc. Used to buy packs of the discs. Still got that in an attic somewhere. I wish, packed in, you know, silicone gel so it won't die. I wish I knew where it was. But yeah, do you know what? The ZX Spectrum was amazing to me. Pirating games, yeah, right, I said that. It is. That was part of the fun. You know, getting the levels right on the cassette recorder to do it. You know, Playground Wars with mates, Commodore, Amstrad, Spectrum. No, the Amstrad kids were always neutral. But the Spectrum Commodore kids used to go at it. You know, that was part of it as well. More so than, you know, later on, because I was the only kid for years who only had a Mega Drive in my school, because I imported it. So that probably would have been a year and a half actually. But yeah, so there was no Playground Wars there until later on, but the Spectrum was, you know, saving up birthday money, Christmas money, going downtown. My mum used to do this. I've said it before in different videos about different systems. Take us to Western Supermare. We used to go to Dolphin Square. We'd have fish and chips, but first we'd spend our birthday money. Used to do it to, as I said, British Home Stores. We'd go there on our birthdays sometimes as well and have, because they used to have an amazing, didn't they, canteen in there. Not for the staff, for everyone. And you know, things like that. It just, and having so many games that you simply couldn't get bored, or if you got bored, you had no right to complain, because unlike, you know, later on with the Master, because that was like an eye-opener, like, oh my god, look how expensive the games are on the Spectrum. It was just mountains of software that you could afford. That was a big point, I think, that made it so appealing, or why I loved it so much. You know, just more games than you could shake a shitty stick at. And obviously, like I said, we had the light gun for the Spectrum. A bit poor, like, came with the Operation Wolf, didn't it? It used to put a big line on the screen like that. But the ZX Spectrum to me will always be, you know, I say it kind of varies from time to time, but I say, you know, this is my favourite system, this is my favourite system. Deep down, mainly, if you ever hear me say that, you can correct me, actually. Deep down, it is the ZX Spectrum, my introduction to the world of computers. An absolutely bloody amazing machine with so much fun and nostalgia. Still to this day, I can sit there and just play through memories and just get lost in them, because it was absolutely fantastic. I wouldn't be a gamer if it wasn't for that machine. You know, that is ultimately where my true love of video games, that's still going on strong, you know, 30 odd years later, 35 years later, was born. So, you know, I have to say, thank you, Sir Clive. You are a bloody legend, and you created the core memories of my childhood. Anyway, as always, I'd love to know what you think. Were you know, a Commodore kid? Did you used to argue with the Spectrum kids? Were you secretly jealous? You know, did you tape to tape? Did you do all these great things on the best system ever made? And as always, thank you very much for watching. I'll see you later.